You're listening to Kizuki, the podcast. I'm Mae Yoshikawa, and I define the Japanese concept of Kizuki as the following. Kizuki. 1. A moment of epiphany, an aha of realization or insight which opens the knower to a new dimension of truth that was formerly unknown. 2. Steps in an incremental growth of awareness, resulting in a movement from ignorance to greater awareness of the bigger picture. A kind of knowing that cannot be undone, that cannot be unrealized. As a longtime yoga and meditation practitioner, a world traveler, and curious self-explorer, I'm obsessed with Kizukis. Listen on each week for inspiring and enlightening stories that may just tip you over for your next aha. On this week's episode, knowing that you don't know. To tell you the truth, I thought that I knew the most some 20 years ago as a kid, just out of university, having started yoga and traveling to India and diving deep into the practice of meditation, becoming a yoga teacher, and then shortly thereafter being hired to grace the cover of yoga magazines and stuff like that. The weird thing is, as I was studying yoga, I also learned that the definition of avidya, which is often translated as ignorance in English, is the prefix, which means opposite or anti, vidya, which translates as knowledge, knowing, wisdom. So avidya literally is not knowing or unknowing. And I learned that the definition of avidya then is not knowing that you don't know. Strangely enough, I think it took me years to realize that I didn't know, because what got in the way? I thought that I knew. Isn't that weird? It's like around the time I had been practicing daily for, maybe 2 years, going on 3 years. I had changed my lifestyle, my morning routine, waking up, my eating habits, my diet, and even some of my friends and the way that I worked. I had changed all of these things drastically in my life. And because I had really turned my health and wellness upside down from the dumpster that I started in, I felt better. I thought I was doing great, and I thought that I knew that much more. In some senses, I did, but in all other ways, I was just getting started, and I didn't even know it. A few years down the road, as I continued to travel to India, quite often twice a year in the first, 10 years or so, I would meet and practice with all of these fellow yoga practitioners and teachers from different parts of the world. Many of them at the time were seniors to me. They had been practicing 10, 20, some even 30 years longer than I had, because I was one of the young ones. I had just started a number of years ago. And I remember one morning stepping out of the shala in Mysore, South India, and I went to grab one of those coconuts, a fresh coconut, to hydrate myself after the practice. And I saw a senior teacher, a long-standing, famous teacher actually, sitting like a small crunched-up ball in front of the gate to the shala, barely reaching his coconut, just looking absolutely beat and flattened. I didn't really know him, and even if I did, I wasn't one to talk much in those minutes and hours after practice. I just really preferred to keep to myself and immerse myself in the energy of the practice. But I heard some other people go up to him and say, "Hey, are you okay? Like, you look really wiped." And I heard him say, "I don't know." Somehow, that left an impression on me, because I think I saw him as someone who had been practicing some 20 years longer than I have, and someone who I respected and many people respected. And he just looked wiped from a day's practice. And then he also said, sometimes the more I practice, the more I don't know. And I was like, what? That's so mind-boggling. But of course, as I continued along my path of yoga and meditation, I got to exactly where he was at on that day. I got to the realization, actually, over and over again, that the more I know, the more I learn how little I know. In other words, the more I realize, the more I know that I don't know. So the Sanskrit word avidya, often translated as ignorance in English, when you break it down, the prefix a is for opposite or anti. And the word vidya translates as knowledge, knowing, wisdom. So avidya is literally not knowing. But then I also learned that true avidya is not knowing that you don't know. In other words, true avidya is thinking that you know when you actually don't know. And while the word itself might translate as ignorance, in our modern day world, we might just call that youth. I mean, haven't we all been there? So strangely enough, life and the evolution of consciousness, awareness, has it that the more we expand our consciousness, the more we gain awareness, the more we realize how little we actually know, because the more we open ourselves to a vast, vast universe. That might be a different take on knowledge than the kind of book knowledge that schools and different studies would have us memorizing and learning, but more the living, breathing application and practice of realization and awareness, or as I like to use the Japanese word, kizuki. Because once you realize something, you can't unrealize it. Once you open yourself, your conscious awareness, to the possibility that this universe, our experience, might be far more intricate and grand and vast than we ever learned at school or we ever allowed ourselves to even begin to think. When you begin to open yourself to that possibility, time to begin to get comfortable with how small you are, how small I am, and at the same time, how one little small piece of stardust could make all the difference in the world. Maybe not in everyone's world, but in your world. Thank you for listening. Learn more about me in my upcoming book, Kizuki, Realizations Beyond Time and Death, at my website, MAEY.LIVE, or find me on Instagram at MAEYOSHIKAWA.